You don't believe Spielberg worked on video games? Well, he did. I talked to developers that worked with him.
Most people don't know Steven was a huge gamer. Like way big into games.
An incredibly talented individual and great insights of human beings all the way around. One of his comments was, people like to watch physical things play out because they think they know how they're going to play out, but then they're surprised. And then kids just like to break stuff.
I wanted to know why he loved video games so much, how involved he was in these projects, how this led us to Call of Duty and Angry Birds, and some of his crazy billion-dollar gaming ideas.
Spielberg had come in and talked to the designers there, and he says, I think people would be really excited about having a game where they kind of had a house and they've cooked dinners and they, kind of be able to imagine themselves living in a different life. And everybody kind of poo-pooed the idea and said, who's gonna want to have a game? And effectively, they described The Sims, in no uncertain terms.
But before we get into COD and Angry Birds, it's important to know Spielberg's impact on video games was actually pretty substantial. I think it's only because of his cinema resume, which is otherworldly, that his impact on gaming is somewhat left in the shadows. If you've lived on any other planet besides this one, let me remind you what movies Spielberg has given us. Jaws, Close Encounters of a Third Kind, Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan. Okay, that's enough. That list is just movies he's worked on before the year 2000. His movies have grossed over $10 billion at the box office. Having said all that, his first video game is probably not what you expect it to be. In my opinion though, it's easily the funniest.
Welcome. I've chosen you to direct our next project, so welcome to the studio.
Mr. Spielberg, I'm highly underqualified for this position. I make shit YouTube content. If you hire me, we will lose significant amounts of money.
It basically allows you to be a director on a Hollywood set as you try to make the studio billions, like he did. Budgeting, editing, costume problems, working with actors, which weirdly enough, Tarantino is a big actor in your movie. I'm not really sure what kind of bet he lost to be involved in this. Oh, wait a minute. He's just in this so he can make out with Jennifer Aniston, and honestly, that's actually fair. You can also design movie posters, watch scriptwriters give you scripts, and add sound effects. This game makes zero sense in 2024 because you can literally do all of these things now. I mean, I'm actually doing that right now, and it's way more fun. If you're good at it, you can even make money from it. This game hasn't exactly aged well, but the concept Spielberg was going for was certainly unique. See, they actually had bigger plans for this series. They wanted to make more games that would be centered around different Hollywood directors. Imagine Part 2 with Tarantino or Scorsese as the directors. But it seems that Microsoft had other plans.
Microsoft said they wanted to buy the games and would distribute them. What we came to learn, and I may be getting myself in trouble, but maybe not. Microsoft, unbeknownst to us, was developing Microsoft Movie Maker at the same time. And my personal opinion, I believe what happened is that Movie Maker got released and pushed and marketed, and Director's Chair got buried so that it wouldn't compete with it.
Something was becoming very clear as I talked to more and more developers. Spielberg's ability to see trends in the future.
He's always been connected to the zeitgeist of what's going on in pop culture, right? And cultural media. So his project picking is immaculate. It's just he's always been finger on the pulse.
The next game is another positive step in the right direction. The Dig is a click-based puzzle game surrounding a group of scientists tasked with landing on an asteroid and finding a way to prevent it from colliding with Earth. They are then teleported onto a mysterious planet where they have to solve puzzles to get back home. This game was developed by LucasArts and was originally based on an idea from Spielberg's Amazing Stories, which got an unfortunate reboot in 2020. It was believed that Spielberg wanted to create a movie, but could never get budgeting approval for something of this scope. Armageddon with Bruce Willis would be a comparable movie at the time, and that cost $140 million to make. That would be around $270 million in today's money, easily making it into the top 20 most expensive movies of all time. You can see why a studio might have been hesitant to make such a splash, and therefore a video game was born. The game went through many phases and designers, and after 7 years of production, finally landed on store shelves. Another interesting fact is that this game was conceived in 1989 at Skywalker Ranch by Spielberg and George Lucas, on the exact same day as the '89 San Francisco earthquake that killed 63 people and caused close to 4,000 injuries. I know point-and-click puzzle games seem like a relic of the past, but during this time, they were some of the most popular games on the market. The Dig was a relatively well-received game at the time, and showcased some of the potential yet to be unlocked in terms of storytelling in video games. After this game, his focus as a filmmaker and video game developer shifted to the World War I era. He once again saw where pop culture was going and what would be popular. He drew inspiration from another popular shooting game at the time.
I'm playing a lot of GoldenEye. I'm about to release Saving Private Ryan. You don't want the Saving Private Ryan license. It's not appropriate, but you guys should do GoldenEye World War II.
But before we jump into Medal of Honor, aka the OG Call of Duty, there is a game that is sort of a cult classic, and not in a good way, that also had Spielberg attached to it. That game is E.T. on Atari 2600. Although Spielberg was only involved in the licensing part of the deal, he was in talks with developers like Howard Scott Warshaw. Apparently, when Warshaw presented the game to Spielberg, he said this:
"That's really great, Howard. It feels just like a movie." Then he looks up at me and says, "Couldn't you do something more like Pac-Man?" My inner world collapses.
Believing the concept too derivative of common game design, Warshaw proceeded with his concept, which he believed would capture the sentimentality he saw in the original film. I absolutely love this part. Warshaw later stated, in retrospect, Spielberg's idea might have had merit. This game was actually nothing significant during its time. Many studios created crappy movie adaptation games during theatrical releases that really squeezed every penny out of gullible fans. By the way, Warshaw was forced to make this game within 5 weeks. The interesting part about this story is that, for some reason, Atari, after realizing the game was not selling, buried it in the desert. Or that was the myth in the gaming industry, until 2 years ago, people actually went there to find out.
We found an intact E.T. the video game.
Okay, let's talk about a game that forever changed the landscape of first-person shooters, especially on consoles.
Good morning, Lieutenant. I'm Colonel Hargrove from the Office of Strategic Services. Our mission is anything and everything. Espionage, sabotage, subversion, search and rescue, you name it, we do it.
Medal of Honor was released in 1999, and it was an original concept created by Spielberg. Revisiting the game today, despite its graphical and gameplay limitations, the game still creates an eerie atmosphere, similar to Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan. As you walk through Nazi-infested streets of Europe or undercover missions inside their headquarters, there is a real sense of tension created by the setting and music. The man behind this is Michael Giacchino. He is a Emmy Award-winning composer who ended up working on things like Up, Ratatouille, Rogue One, and countless other films. Spielberg's role was mostly based on creating authenticity and cinematic quality. His world-class experience in storytelling and passion for history helped shape the game's narrative and overall direction. Medal of Honor is, of course, a franchise that is, for better or for worse, responsible for the most popular shooter franchise of all time, Call of Duty.
A large part of that team became the Call of Duty team, or one of the Call of Duty teams. They became Infinity Ward. The lightning in the bottle slowly dissipated over the years.
While Spielberg's direct involvement in game development might not have been extensive, his role as executive producer lent credibility to the project and contributed to its overall marketing appeal. One fact that seems to be common amongst game developers' stories is Spielberg's willingness to give talented people creative freedom and let them do what they do best.
You know, he was very respectful of other people's disciplines, and it just goes, I'm sure it comes from working in the movie industry where he's hiring the best people he can find in a particular role, and you have to give those individuals space to be creative if you're going to have any kind of get their best work.
This is an undervalued trait in a leader, and it's probably one of the big reasons the people that have worked with him have nothing but positive things to say.
Right, but the question I have is this, and this is whenever I see a celebrity who's done a game is it his name that someone else did? Because that's probably what it is.
From a developer's perspective, it's easy to be upset at someone that only attached their name to the project, but didn't put in 60 hours a week or was not involved in crunches that were far too common in this time. So I asked developer Lewis Castle just how involved Steven was in this project.
I was really surprised because I presumed, I suppose, before working with him, that he would be kind of tangentially involved, oversee it occasionally, review things, but he really did make an effort to come out to the studio every week. He would spend an hour or more. We were only supposed to get an hour of time, but there were so many times I couldn't even count that we would be in the middle of something and he would pick up the phone, call his assistant, say, move the next 2 appointments, I'm going to be here for a while. And I always was thinking, oh my God, I can't believe that we're sitting here jamming about a game that we're making together, and somebody who's probably really important in Hollywood just got bumped, you know?
The story seemed to line up with each developer I talked to. His involvement was indeed substantial for someone of his stature. We have to understand that this is one of the most successful names in a trillion-dollar industry. His stature can't be understated and his time underappreciated. He did have a clear passion for gaming and wanted his games to succeed.
But DreamWorks Interactive, the location was on Steven's. It was on Steven's route to work. So between his house and Amblin, so that he could stop by whenever he wanted. Yeah, that was intentional. It was absolutely intentional.
The interesting part about Spielberg is that he had ideas for games that would later go on to be billion-dollar franchises.
They had said that Spielberg had come in and talked to the designers there, and he says, I think people would be really excited about having a game where they kind of had a house and they've cooked dinners and they, kind of be able to imagine themselves living in a different life. And everybody kind of poo-pooed the idea and said, who's gonna want to have a game? And effectively, they described The Sims. He had some other ideas that we collectively just didn't do because of just the scope of them. He had some ideas about a game system that would basically making a game where you could make games. And
that exists, Dreams, right? Is that there's a PS4?
Yeah. And I mean, you could probably, but he wanted it to be. He really thought about the blockiness and everything because of the limitations of the machine and all that. I mean, you could easily argue that would be a kind of a Roblox or something like that.
Right. Maybe the obvious question here that we have yet to answer is why? Why does Spielberg love video games? Why has he been involved in so many? Apparently, in the early days of his filmmaking career, he would often play quite a bit of Pong on set. Richard Dreyfuss and Spielberg went off and played Pong on one of the piers. They played until the machine was full of quarters and couldn't play anymore. We've all been there, playing video games way beyond what most would consider normal and start approaching a serious addiction. That's someone that truly loves video games. In other interviews, Spielberg showed off his arcade collections with games like Donkey Kong, Space Invaders, and Missile Command. He also compared how long it takes to get a high from a video game and how long it takes from making a movie.
It's a quick thrill. I mean, it takes me a year to have a quick thrill with a movie. I peak a lot during the year and I have a couple highs, but essentially it's only when the movie's done that you're able to look at it and say, finally it's over, I'm satisfied. With a video game, I can play that. I can play Tempest. In 10 minutes, I can probably feel totally like I've accomplished something today.
The final topic of this video is Angry Birds. Wikipedia states that Angry Birds was inspired by a game called Crush the Castle, but Lewis seems to think otherwise.
Although Boom Blox was a very highly rated game on the Wii and sold reasonably well, at the end of the day, it was, the inspiration for Angry Birds. At least that's what the guys from Angry Birds had said in a couple of their early interviews. Later, they were pretty mums on that. So maybe somebody told them, "Don't give credit to another game." But I'm certain my memory is clear that they had said, "Yeah, we saw this game Boom Blox. It was really cool."
Angry Birds 1 and 2 combined for over 300 million downloads, making them two of the most downloaded mobile games of all time. And playing Boom Blox today, it's easy to see where the inspiration came. There are many elements Angry Birds incorporates from Boom Blox, from its physics-based gameplay to its fun, cartoonish design to some of its box mechanics. It's also worth mentioning that Crush the Castle came out on April 28, 2009, while Boom Blox came out almost an entire year earlier on May 6, 2008. It would be very hard to believe that developers of Angry Birds didn't hear about the successful game published by EA on one of the best-selling consoles of all time. That was created by Steven Spielberg. Spielberg continued to work on games. In late 2010, Project codenamed LMNO was supposed to be a revolutionary first-person parkour adventure game.
The progress that had been made was just stunning, and although we didn't have enough of it stood up to be even called a vertical slice yet, the quality and the aspirations were just amazing. I mean, it was years before I saw something that even looked close to as good as a game.
It seems that Spielberg was always driven to create or be part of groundbreaking projects. His final Medal of Honor game in 2020 was an ambitious VR shooter. Although a decent game, it was just outgunned by Valve's Half-Life Alyx earlier that year. Even in 2024, Spielberg is involved with video games in some way. He is the executive producer of the Halo TV show, and this headline really sums it up for me. Steven Spielberg was more involved than we expected. We treated it as though it was a legacy project of Steven's. He godfathered it in terms of reading every script, helping choose showrunners, writers, director, cast, production design, and visual effects. Every aspect of it he looked at. My expectation before deep diving into the story would be the same. This was just a big name that attached itself to these games, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. Spielberg is a gamer, and he has a clear passion for games.
It's an interesting experience to direct Steven Spielberg in a shoot, right? He's on the green screen and we're doing the simulation elements, and what do you do when you finish a shot with Steven Spielberg? You say, cut. So, Steven, what'd you think?
Right.
And I'm not kidding. Half the time he would turn to makeup and hair and he'd go, I don't know, did my hair look okay? They'd say, yeah, you'd look great. And I'd say, then it must be good.